The woman in front of her at checkout was counting coins at 6:47 on a Tuesday evening, and the line behind her had grown 7 people long. Nobody said anything out loud. But Nkechi Owusu Boateng, standing third in line with a basket of 4 items and $11.63 in her wallet, watched the woman's hands shake over the coin pile and felt something move through her chest that she had no name for. The woman was somewhere in her 60s. Gray braids pulled back tight. A print dress that had been washed so many times the flowers on it had faded to suggestions. Her basket held a small tin of sardines, a bag of plain rice, a carton of long-life milk, and 1 onion, the kind of basket that tells a whole story in 4 items. The total was $9.41. The woman had $6.88 in coins, and she had already counted them twice. The cashier, a young man with a name tag that read Dexter, had already sighed once, loud enough for the people behind him to hear. He was 22 years old and running a 6 p.m. shift, and the woman in front of him was costing him speed. That was the full measure of his thinking. Nkechi stepped forward before she had made a decision to step forward. She placed a $20 bill flat on the belt and said, simply, "Cover whatever she's short." She did not look at Dexter. She did not look at the woman. She looked at the small tin of sardines and the bag of rice and kept her voice level, the way her grandmother Mom had taught her. Not proud, not performing, just present. The woman turned. Her eyes had that glassy stillness of someone trying not to cry in a public place. She started to say something. Nkechi shook her head once, quietly, and looked away. She did not want to be thanked. She did not want to be seen. She had $11.63 in her wallet and $214 in her bank account and rent due in 9 days. And she still paid. Because that is what you do when you have been that woman at the counter. You know what it costs. You pay it forward, without ceremony. Because ceremony would make the woman feel worse, not better. The cashier handed the woman her change, $10.59, with a face that showed nothing. The woman walked toward the door. She looked back at Nkechi once. Nkechi was already unloading her basket. Nobody else in the line said anything. A man near the back checked his phone. Nkechi walked home to her apartment on the 2nd floor of a building on Tema Motorway Access Road, Accra, with a bag of rice, a tin of mackerel, 2 eggs, and a small bunch of Contamire she had paid $9.87 for. She ate rice with an egg fried in a little palm oil and went to bed at 9:22 p.m. because she had a 5:30 a.m. shift at the front desk of a commercial building on Osu Oxford Street, where she had worked for 4 years, 11 months, and 17 days without missing a single morning. She did not think about the woman again. She did not think she had done anything worth thinking about. 7 days later, on a Tuesday at 4:48 in the afternoon, a black SUV with tinted rear windows pulled onto Access Road, slowed, and stopped in front of her building. She did not know who sent it. But the person inside had been looking for her since the moment she walked away from that checkout line. Nkechi Adieze Owusu Boateng was 37 years old, 124 pounds, and had been losing weight slowly for 8 months because she ate 1 proper meal a day and stretched the second with plain rice or roasted yam. She would not have described herself as struggling. She would have described herself as managing. The distinction mattered to her the way a properly ironed collar matters, because it was the difference between dignity and defeat, and she had chosen dignity so many times it was no longer a choice. It was just who she was. She had come to Accra from Kumasi 11 years ago with a certificate in office administration and the phone number of a woman named Patience, who knew someone who could find her a room. The room cost 350 cedis a month and had a window that did not close fully. She had stuffed the gap with a folded dish towel for 3 years while she saved enough to move somewhere with walls that didn't breathe. The apartment on Access Road had walls that breathed. But they were her walls, and she had been there for 6 years, and the landlord, Mr. Acevedo, was a quiet man who fixed things when she asked and did not ask questions. She wore a pale blue short-sleeved shirt to work every day. She owned 3 of them, identical, bought on sale from a market stall near Kwame Nkrumah Circle for 12 cedis each. She washed them by hand on Sunday evenings and hung them to dry on the small line on her balcony. And by Monday morning they were pressed flat with an iron that took 4 minutes to heat. When people at her building's front desk saw her, they saw someone polished and correct. They did not see the iron. They did not see the dish towel in the window gap. They saw a woman who had herself together, and that was precisely what she intended. She carried her mother's coin purse, black leather, hand-stitched along the top edge, bought in Kejetia Market in Kumasi in 1989 by a woman named Abena Owusu who had saved 80 pesewas a week for 11 weeks to buy it because she wanted something that would last. The stitching had frayed at one corner and been re-sewn with dark thread that didn't quite match, and the clasp caught sometimes on the second press. Nkechi had been offered newer purses, smaller and lighter and unfrayed. She had never accepted any of them. The purse had been in her mother's hand when they buried her, and then it had come home with Nkechi, and that was the end of the discussion. Her goal, stated plainly, was this. She wanted to own one piece of property before she was 40. Not a house, a room. One room with a door she owned that nobody could lock her out of. She had $1,847 in a savings account she had been building for 6 years, and she was 41 months from being able to put a deposit on a small plot in a scheme on the outskirts of Accra. 41 months. She knew the number exactly. She checked it the way other people checked the weather. The skill she had was this. She could read a person in 30 seconds. Not their mood, their structure, how they held their power, whether the thing they were projecting matched the thing they were. She had developed this ability over 11 years at front desks, watching people arrive and depart and arrive again. Watching who dropped their voice when they spoke to the woman at reception and who kept their voice steady. She kept a small notebook. She never showed it to anyone. It held observations that would have surprised the people she had written about. She had not thought to use this skill. It was simply how she moved through the world. She did not know yet that it was about to become the most valuable thing she owned. The commercial building on Osu Oxford Street was called Sterling House, a 12-floor office block built in 2009 that housed 4 financial services companies, 2 law firms, and a regional headquarters for an agriculture import company. Nkechi had been its first and only front desk officer. She had been hired at a salary of 1,400 cedis a month and was now earning 2,100, which had not been increased in 18 months despite a conversation with building management in which she had presented a documented record of her performance, including the names of 11 companies that had cited her specifically in their building reviews. The record had been received with appreciation. The salary had not changed. The building manager was a man named Raymond Yeboah, 46, who wore cologne that arrived 10 seconds before he did, and believed that the front desk was a decorative function rather than an operational one. He spoke to Nkechi in the particular tone used by men who have convinced themselves they are being generous when they are being condescending. She had kept her responses brief and correct for 4 years, 11 months, and 17 days. The security team were 3 men named Emmanuel, Fiifi, and Ajoa. Ajoa was a woman and had been hired last and was spoken to by Raymond in a tone even shorter than the one he used for Nkechi. Nkechi and Adjoa ate lunch together on most days. They sat on the rear steps facing the parking lot and shared whatever either of them had brought. And they did not talk about Raymond. Not because there was nothing to say, but because Nkechi had made a decision years ago that she would not spend the hours of her life feeding things that could not be changed by feeding. What could be changed, she believed, she would change. What could not, she would outlast. What she did not know, what she would not know for another 7 days, was that the thing she had spent 4 years outlasting was already in the process of being removed. And the woman she had paid for at the checkout on a Tuesday evening was the reason why. The 8 days between the grocery store and the SUV were not easy ones. On Wednesday, Raymond called Nkechi into his office at 11:47 a.m. and told her that the building management board had decided to outsource front desk operations to a facility services company starting in 60 days. She would be informed of her severance terms by Friday. He said this looking at a point somewhere above her left shoulder. He had the expression of a man who had rehearsed his neutrality. Nkechi said 3 words, "I understand." "Thank you." She went back to her desk and sat down with her hands flat on the surface and looked at the lobby doors for 47 seconds. Then, she straightened the pen holder, which had not moved, and answered the next phone call on the second ring. She did not call anyone. She did not look at her savings account number. She did not perform distress. That evening, she sat at her kitchen table with a piece of paper and wrote down the things she knew how to do. Office administration, building operations, personnel management, unofficial and unacknowledged, but she had been the one orienting every new hire in the building for 11 years. Scheduling, conflict mediation, front-of-house protocol. She underlined the last one and then crossed it out, because she was not sure how to phrase it as a skill rather than a job title. She stared at the list for a long time. Then, she folded the paper into thirds and put it in the coin purse, because the coin purse was where she kept things she intended to return to. On Thursday, it rained. Not the soft rain that comes in the evenings, but the kind that hits Accra in the middle of the week with no announcement. Sheets of water from Corley Lagoon to East Legon, turning gutters into rivers and the road outside Sterling House into a shallow brown lake. Nkechi sat at the front desk at 8:14 a.m. and watched a woman in good shoes attempt to cross from the taxi stand to the entrance, and she stepped outside with the building's umbrella and walked it across to her, before the woman had time to be wet. The woman looked at her. Nkechi walked back to her post. It was the smallest thing. She did not know that the woman whose dry feet she had just saved was 42 years old, was named Pauline Ikebe, and had been trying to reach someone in that building for 3 days. She did not know that Pauline Ikebe had a mobile number in her phone she had been told to call, and she did not know that the name on the mobile number was the name of the person in the SUV that pulled up 7 days after the grocery store. On Friday, Raymond delivered the severance terms in an envelope left on her desk at 9:03 a.m., while she was walking 2 visitors to the elevator. The envelope contained 2 months' salary, a non-disclosure form, and a letter that used the word restructuring 4 times in 3 paragraphs. Nkechi read it at her desk, folded it, put it in her bag, and answered the phone. She signed nothing that day. That Friday evening, she walked past the Makola market end of Oshu Oxford Street, the way she sometimes did when she wanted to think without sitting still. The stalls were shutting, vendors folding cloth and stacking bags, the slow exhale of a market closing down. An older woman named Mama Korkor, who sold dried spices from a stall near the corner, was still open at 6:41 p.m., tying bundles of prekes with quick, practiced hands. Nkechi had bought from her for 2 years. They did not exchange many words on most days. That evening, Mama Corker looked up from the precase and said something Nkechi had not expected. "There was a woman asking about you today." Nkechi stopped. "A woman in good shoes," Mama Corker said. "Came from your building. She was asking the man who sells kenki near the bus stop who the woman was at the desk. He sent her to me." Nkechi stood very still. "Asking what?" "Asking your name," Mama Corker said. "And where you live." She tied one more bundle. Her hands never stopped moving. "I told her your name," she said. "I didn't tell her where you live. I told her if she had something to say to you, she should say it to your face. So I gave her a number." She looked at Nkechi over the precase. She wrote it down. If this story is already making something stir in your chest, subscribe now. Because what Pauline Akebe found when she wrote that number down is something that was years in the making. And what it sets in motion for Nkechi is something that nobody, least of all Nkechi herself, saw coming. The number Mama Corker gave Pauline Akebe was a mobile number that belonged to a woman named Constance, who ran a small business mediation firm out of 2 offices in Cantonments District, and who had known Nkechi for 9 years. Not well, not as a friend, but as the kind of person you know when you are the kind of person who notices people. Constance had given Mama Corker the number the previous year after Nkechi had helped one of Constance's clients navigate a building dispute, quietly and without billing anyone, over 3 mornings before her shift. Constance received Pauline Akebe's call at 7:19 p.m. on a Friday and listened for 11 minutes before she said anything. What Pauline told her she had not expected to hear. What Constance knew about Nkechi, what she had been turning over in her mind for 9 years, was this. Nkechi had a quality that was almost impossible to teach, and nearly impossible to describe to someone who had not watched it in operation. It was not just the reading of people. It was what she did with what she read. She absorbed the information, she held it without performing it, and she used it only when it mattered, and when she used it, it landed with surgical precision. Constance had seen her do it with a hostile board member in a meeting that was about to implode. She had seen her do it with a young security guard who had been falsely accused of theft. She had seen her do it at a grocery store checkout on a Tuesday evening when she had $11.63 in her wallet and a woman in front of her who was $2.53 short. What Constance had not known, what nobody had known, including Nkechi, was that the woman in the faded print dress and gray braids had not been a stranger at all. She was Patience Antwi Asante, 63 years old, retired after 31 years as the personal executive assistant to a man named Al Danjuma Mensah, the same Al Danjuma Mensah who had built Sterling House in 2009 and whose daughter now ran the management company that owned it. Patience Antwi Asante had been having a medical crisis in the months before the grocery store, a diagnosis, a hospital stay, a slow and disorienting return to her own life, and in the middle of that return, a moment in a checkout line where she had felt invisible, and then, without preamble, seen. She had not known the woman's name. She had only her face. She had gone looking. When she found it, she had made a phone call, and the person she had called was Al Danjuma Mensah's daughter, whose name was Pauline Akebe, who had been trying to reach someone in Sterling House for 3 days, who had good shoes and had been saved from the rain on a Thursday morning by a woman with an umbrella and a specific kind of quiet. The black SUV parked in front of Nkechi's building at 4:48 on Tuesday afternoon. The driver stayed in the car. The back door opened, and a woman got out, Pauline Akebe, 42 years old, in a dark green dress and low heels, carrying a leather folder and nothing else. She looked up at the building the way people look at things they have taken the time to find. She did not send anyone to announce her. She found the building number, and she rang Nkechi's unit herself. Nkechi was at her kitchen table with the piece of paper she had taken from the coin purse, the list of things she knew how to do. She had been looking at it for 20 minutes. She was not crying. She did not cry easily, and she did not cry in kitchens. She went to the intercom. "Nkechi Owusu Boateng," said the voice through the speaker. "My name is Pauline Ikebe. A woman named Patience sent me. May I come up?" It was not a question. The voice was level and direct and had the specific quality of a person who was not accustomed to being told no, but who was also, unmistakably, genuinely asking. Nkechi said, "Second floor. Door on the left." She put the piece of paper face down on the table. Then she turned it back over, because she was not a woman who hid things, and went to open the door. Pauline sat across the kitchen table from Nkechi and opened the leather folder to a single printed document. She placed it on the table between them and said 6 words. "I want to offer you something." The document was a 12-month contract. Director of operations for a new commercial property management company that Pauline's firm was launching across 3 buildings in Accra, 2 in East Legon, and 1 in Cantonments District. The role was to build the operational framework, train the frontline staff, and establish the protocols from the ground up. The salary on the contract was 7,400 cedis a month, more than 3 times what Nkechi was earning. 12 months guaranteed, renewable annually. Nkechi looked at the document for a long time. She did not reach for it. "Why me?" she said. "Patience told me what you did at the checkout," Pauline said. "But that's not why." She paused. "I've been watching how Sterling House runs for 2 years. I was trying to find who was holding the building's front of house together. I kept hearing your name. Then I went to the building. I watched. I saw the umbrella." She leaned forward slightly. "You read the room correctly every time I watched you. That is not a common ability. You also don't perform it. That matters more." Nkechi looked at the coin purse on the table next to her. The frayed corner. The clasp that caught. She said, "I need 3 days." "Take them," Pauline said. She stood, closed the folder, and left it on the table. The driver was still in the SUV. He had the window down slightly and was listening to something low and musical. He opened the door for Pauline without being asked. The SUV moved off Access Road and turned toward the Tema motorway. Its taillights were 2 red points in the early evening. Nkechi stood at her kitchen window and watched until it was gone. She went back to the table and sat down. She picked up the piece of paper, the list. She looked at the last item she had written. She had crossed it out because she was not sure how to phrase it as a skill rather than a job title. The item was Front of House Protocol. She uncrossed it. 3 days later, on a Friday morning at 8:49 a.m., she called Pauline Ikebe and said yes. The contracts were signed at Pauline's office in Cantonments District on the following Monday at 10 a.m. Nkechi arrived 7 minutes early. She was wearing the pale blue shirt, pressed flat that morning. She brought the coin purse. She brought the list. Raymond Yeboah received a letter from the Sterling House Management Board the same week. It informed him that the outsourcing arrangement for front desk operations had been reviewed and reversed. It also informed him that a third-party review of building operations requested by the building's owner had identified a pattern of underinvestment in operational staffing that had been partially concealed from the owner's office. The review cited a specific case, a 4-year, 11-month period in which a single officer had performed functions equivalent to a 3-person team. and had been declined a salary increase despite documented performance evidence. The review was authored by a firm in Cantonments District. The author's name was Pauline Achebe. Raymond Yeboah thought he was restructuring a front desk. He did not know who Nkechi was. He had never thought to find out. But the truth is, he had not restructured anything. He had simply made room. Some people spend their whole lives in positions that are too small for them, not because they lack the size, but because the people above them mistake the frame for the picture. They mistake the location for the capacity. They look at a woman behind a lobby desk and they see a lobby desk. They do not see the 37 years of study that went into the woman's ability to walk into any room and immediately understand who in that room is performing power and who is actually holding it. You cannot take that from someone by handing them an envelope on a Friday morning. You cannot restructure a person's architecture. The things people build inside themselves, the skills sharpened on nothing, the dignity preserved without applause, the reading of rooms done quietly and never recorded anywhere but one small notebook. Those things are not in any filing cabinet Raymond Yeboah ever had access to. They were never in the building to begin with. They traveled with her, and the night he slid that envelope onto her desk without looking at her, the only thing he actually handed her was the beginning of the rest of her life. Now it is 4 months after that Friday. Nkechi Adiaze Owusu Boateng is sitting in a second-floor corner office in a building on Ambrose Crescent in Cantonments District. Across the office has a window that closes properly. On her desk there is a pen holder, a phone, the coin purse, and a framed piece of paper, the list, handwritten in her own handwriting, with every item upright and none of them crossed out. The savings account is still there. The goal is still there. It is now 26 months away instead of 41. She arrives each morning at 8:43 a.m. She leaves when the work is done. She does not perform either arrival or departure. On Tuesday evenings, she sometimes stops at the checkout near Access Road on her way home. She carries enough. Here is the question I want to leave with you. There was a moment in that checkout line, a single Tuesday evening at 6:47 p.m. when Nkechi had $11.63 in her wallet and she chose to put a $20 bill on the belt for a stranger she would never see again. She did not expect anything. She was not performing generosity. She was not thinking about what would come back to her. She was thinking about a woman whose hands were shaking over a coin pile, and she responded to what she saw. If you were standing in that line, with $11.63 in rent due in 9 days and a job that was about to end, would you have stepped forward? Not for the story, not for the outcome, just for the shaking hands. Leave your answer in the comments. I really want to read it. Subscribe for more stories about quiet strength, hidden lives, and the people the world looks past until it can no longer afford to. I'll see you in the next one.